All right, so thank you guys again. We're going to be starting off with doing an exercise which is focused on observation skills once again, because whether you're drawing or painting, being able to see and observe and practicing looking, observing carefully is just important for anything that you're doing, for any type of drawing or painting. So I'm going to quickly walk you guys through a PowerPoint here, learning how to draw. So I start off with I have this little picture here because learning to draw is no different. Observational drawing is no different than learning how to write. It's just moving your pencil in different ways. Now,
Becky's art.
Okay, so you'll need to let me know if it's advancing. Okay, so anyway, moving on. All right?
What's most important thing to you when drawing?
Okay, so the most important thing, I'm going to skip sort of through this. A lot of people would say that our pencil is the most important thing, but the truth is actually it's not our most important thing because many people you can draw without a pencil or any sort of instrument. It's not our hand. Neither is it actually our imagination, which is the most important thing. And the most important thing we use really is our eyes. And even when we're drawing out of our imagination, we first get things into our imagination through observing the world around us through our eyes. And that's how we are able to get all of those ideas. That's how we get to the point of being able to, when we imagine something, be able to actually put it down on paper. Because so often we're at that point where we say, I see this, but I can't put it down on paper. So that's why we always still want to focus on that. I went through this already before, so I'm just going to go quickly. Just an example of why that is because, so this is a door, but if we move the door, it looks entirely different because every time something moves, it looks different. So this is why we have to focus on what you see and not what you know, to the point where I would even tell students to forget. Another example is these are actually two views of a cylinder and they're done entirely different. And if we do another view, it looks like this. So once again, completely different sort of views, a little more complex. Why we forget everything we know, and I've actually had people do this, is because when we draw what we know, this is what we know about tables. They're rectangles. They're even along the floor. They all even at the bottom. So all the legs reach to the floor. But this is what tables look like. So when we focus what we see, we don't actually see a rectangle. It's more like a parallelogram. The legs are not all even along the bottom. And if we want to get really specific, we even add all these other parts. So this is the importance of being able to see the shape. So what I want to take you guys through, and this is going to be more the practice that you guys are going to be practicing now. And so when we look at this, first of all, it's just black and white blobs. This might be a bit repetitive for some of you guys who've had a course with me before, but it's always such a good exercise. But as we look closer and we actually back away from it, we see that these blobs are beginning to change and something is actually emerging. So what we notice is that there's more to them than just black and white blobs. They're actually very distinct shapes. And these shapes form an actual image. And that's the whole point, is being able to see and understand an image as nothing but just a series of shapes, okay? And each of those shapes represents probably not the right word, but they become the illusion of something very different, okay? So these shapes all came from this photograph here of this elephant, and what they're based on is the highlights and the shadows. So here's another example, once again. Oh, something's funny, there were the words. I'll have to fix that later. Okay, so we can see these pictures that we can tell exactly who they are. We can tell that this is a cow. But the thing that I want to point out is if we go by what we think we know about eyes, if you can see this one in the bottom left, this is not how we know an eye is, but this is how we see an eye. Or in this case, we see an eye like this, and we see a nose like this. So this is the real important thing, is because in a photograph, or when we're looking at something such as a photo, I apologize for the mess in these words here. I'm not sure what happened there. When we look at a photograph and we break it down in our mind into just shapes, this is more what we see. And just by themselves, they're nothing, but when they are put together in the right place, then they do actually form pictures. Okay, so chimpanzee, a cow, whatever it is. Okay, so the most important thing is really focusing on shape. So this is an exercise that we do, but I wanted to mix it up and give you guys a little bit more creativity as you practice this. So I sent you a series of photos on WhatsApp that you can access on your phone, and you know, pick one. Maybe you can read the title, see one that looks interesting, and then bring that up. And then the idea is to be able to break it down and draw it not as you know, an eye like we would normally draw an eye, but to really see that as just a dark shape. So shapes of dark and light. In the case, in this one, this was done where everything was turned into only black and white. You can also include just gray if we want to, okay? All right, I'm gonna stop this here. We don't need to look at that anymore, okay? So instead, I'm gonna bring up for you the Raven, just for you to see what I'm gonna be practicing with here. In a second, let me, okay. So we have this, oh, I have so many windows open here from other people on. Can you guys see the Raven? Okay, so this is one that I'm gonna be working at. So the idea now for me is to forget that this is a raven and to focus on this is just dark and light shapes. And one of the ways you can even do this, which is helpful, is to actually flip the image upside down, okay? And then what we do is we look at this as not an eye, but just a black shape. We would have to interpret these gray as either black or white, or you can do sometimes gray. I'll leave that up to you to practice. But the idea, however you do it, if you practice it as black, gray, and white, you want to practice seeing the shape. Some of you guys probably are going to want to do some blending and smudging and smearing. I strongly encourage you to not do that for this exercise. That will be far less helpful. It's much better if you do like you saw with the elephant or with the Einstein picture, where every shape becomes very distinct and no smudging, smearing, because when we smudge and smear the edges to try and do some blending, we often lose the shape, okay? Blending is one of the best ways to, or one of the easiest and fastest ways to ruin your drawing is through blending. Blending is not really a necessary, it's simply a style. It's not really a necessary technique unless you're gonna get into some sort of photorealism, but it's not near as important for practicing. So I'm just gonna take just a couple of minutes for you guys to be able to see this on here. So I'll bring this up. So I'm looking at this raven, but I'm not going to to focus on this and see this as a raven. So I can begin, first of all, what I would do is I would do what I call mapping it out. So I get my shapes of black and white in the right place. So just very lightly, I'm going to create my overall shape and just get it roughed in as circles and ovals and shapes like this, so that I get my sizes, my size and my proportion in the right place. And I already see that I have a few things off here because the leg in the photo, I know you guys can't see the photo right now unless you've opened it on your WhatsApp, but this leg is not underneath that. So this just helps me map in and get everything in the right place. And now I will go in and focus on getting my shapes. And it's real important when doing this that you're spending a good amount of time looking at the drawing, and more time looking at your drawing than you are looking at your paper, actually, because that's where your information is. And it's good to practice even. I should have my pencil a little sharper here. It's good to practice being able to draw while you're not looking at your page. So I've got this funny shape here. Just for the sake of this, I'm not doing it upside down, but it would be helpful as well to also do this upside down. If I'm having trouble being able to see this as shapes, and if I keep getting stuck with seeing it as a bird, that's hindering me, then it can help to turn it upside down. So I'm going to fill these in right away just so that you guys can see. Don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to go about a minute longer here. So there are a few lines here. This one is really complex. So all the drawings you might find a bit complex. So as you practice the exercise, it is not important that you finish. Okay? It's much better to slow yourself down and get these shapes as accurate as you can than it would be to finish the whole photo and rush through it and end up with just sort of mediocre shapes. Okay? So this is the idea. Oops. Okay? So trying to see all those little ins and outs, those sort of jagged things, which are being caused by the feathers, but I'm not looking at feathers. I'm just looking at it as a solid black shape. Okay? So whether you're doing, there's pictures of, let's see, boots, there's an old car, a ball glove. I picked out, you can pick your own photos, but I did pick out particular ones that do have very distinct black and white shapes. Not every single photo works well for this exercise, so that's why I took the time to go through and provide some for you guys as well. Okay, so it's wow, that went a little bit fast because we got a bit of a late start and then a little bit slow. So let's take 10 minutes. Okay, so it's like about 4:30 right now. And if you guys actually take about 10 minutes to work at this exercise, go on onto the WhatsApp feed, find a photograph there, and bring it up if you can. Should be able to work, right? And then just take a little bit of time to practice. Again, it can just be just a part of the photo, okay? But practice being able to see these black and white shapes accurately, okay? So just to make mention, sometimes in some cases you really do almost need to include gray, shapes of gray. So if you do, try to keep them very distinct shapes and just try to make them like a middle gray. Try to avoid getting into a whole bunch of different grays where you just are going back to just kind of random drawing. The challenge is to actually challenge you to draw differently. if it's why don't we go ahead and pause a moment, and then if you want to, let me turn down the music here. There we go. Now you can see you guys again. Okay. I'd like to see just how you guys did in your 10 minutes, in your short time. So as I said, from mine, where'd my pencil go? There it is. I in the end decided that because this bird was just so black and would have ended up, I would have had to reduce it so much to just black, it would end up so solid that I went ahead and just put in some gray shape areas. But that's okay because the idea is still the same. You're still focusing on seeing the shape as accurately as you can. And so whether you're putting in solid shapes of white or solid shapes of black or solid shapes of gray, it still is, it's still the same sort of idea, and you still get just as much practice out of it. Okay. So if you guys just sort of want to take a moment and while other people are showing it, it's up to you if you want to see each other's. If you can just turn your camera to yours just for a quick second, then I can see how you guys did. See if it's just mainly just see if you're on the right track. Okay, so Stephanie, you're obviously doing the skull. I can tell that already from the picture, so good job. So is that Jude? Who is that? All I see is that must be Jude. You're totally covering your face with the ballet shoe. So I'd have to take a look at that. Okay, so that's very good. It looks like, yeah, you got the whole drawing down there. I'd have to look at the ballet shoe to see what black and white shapes are in there. So it looks like right now you're just focusing on getting the lines down. So if you want to, you know, work at that a little more if you want, or whatever you want to do. So how about the rest of you guys? Where are you at? How yours? Okay, Bea, so you're also working on the skull. You're just getting things lined out. So yeah. So again, even in this case, that's even one of the hard parts is to break out of. Don't worry about completing the whole thing. Even just take one little section, you know, and even if you just focus on trying to get a shape like, you know, some strange sort of shape like that drawn in as accurately as you can. Even 2, 3, 4 of those is always a good exercise. Okay. This is what, you know, we're used to, you know, sure, you can take the time to map things out. You just sort of want to do, you know, things like that quickly, and then go in there and do this practice of really trying to see the shape of, you know, whatever that orb is or that shadow, whatever that may be. So how about the rest of you guys? Anyone else want to show theirs up? Adria, yours is looking pretty dark. I can't see.
Oh, it's a horse.
Is that? Oh, let me put on speaker view a second, and then
I can barely see it though.
I'll be able to see it if I bring it up to view. Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay, so looks like you're just starting to put in the shapes, were you? Yeah. Okay. So if you feel like working on that a little bit more, the drawing looked very accurate though. Very good. What about Reed?
So, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to have a few more people show theirs. Okay, so Reed also doing the Raven. Very good.
Ooh.
Okay, yeah, good. You're also working with gray as well. Fantastic. And see, Teresa and Brenda, what do you guys have to show?
Because I did the assignment before and I hate sketching, I did this.
Okay.
I worked on that.
Okay, so you're working on something different. Okay.
But I sketched the manta.
There you go. Were you looking at something when you do it?
Yeah, from a photo.
Okay. Brenda, did you get a chance to try it? Oh, I think maybe her screen froze.
Here.
Did you get a chance to try the exercise, Brenda? There it is. Your screen froze again. Looks like you're probably working on the skull, I think. Let me bring it up so I can see it. Whoa, you got a cool pattern going there. I love actually how you're filling it in with the pattern shapes. That's very cool. I'm not sure which one, if you, oh, I don't know if you were able to get the photos or not that we had worked on. Anyway, okay, so the other thing that the plan was to work on. So as I said, to put in this practice, and this is something you would bring into your painting practices as well. Even when you're just painting something, and you have to paint in a shadow on, if you're painting a whale or you're painting a house, and or even a flower, and trying to get that flower, that petal just to look right. A big part of it is being able to see the shape of that red or that blue or whatever it is, okay? And then seeing it accurately, even if you're simplifying it, or if you're drawing a tree and you need to, do some sort of simplified tree, being able to see that simplified shadow, the simplified highlight, you still want to see it accurately, okay? Even something like a shadow, when you're looking at things accurately, you'll notice that it gets, skinnier. So that's just another example. So even, it's not an exercise that only is for people who sketch, okay? It's an exercise that you bring into no matter what sort of art that you're doing, okay? Because otherwise, again, it's the same thing. If we go by what we think we know, we'll draw our shadow of our tree like this, and then it looks like it's sideways or something, okay? So all of those are important. So just, anytime, these are, again, I'm just giving you exercises you can always practice in your sketchbook at any time too, okay? Trying to see those shapes accurately. So, all right. So at this point, I'm just gonna pause. So what I'm going to start with here is just given just the real basics of painting with acrylic. More just what is the paint like, and what does it feel like to work with it, as opposed to any sort of special techniques. So yeah, so the painting I'm working on is this one where I've taken the rhinoceros, broken it down into all these different shapes. And now what I'm going to be doing is just creating the rhinoceros made up of, I've broken all these different sections, and each section will be, like this will be fairly monochromatic, with just creating different variations of oranges all throughout him. So he's not going to be realistic by any means, even though, as you see him, the final drawing of him is still based on realism. So, so this is palette paper that I use for the palettes, and it's great because when you're done, you just throw it away. But just as a little bit of a money-saving tip, is wax paper works fantastic. And if you need to even save even more money, you can even use magazine pages and mix your paint on a magazine page. Any sort of piece of paper that is waterproof works good. So that's why wax paper is better than a magazine page, because it's nice and just blank white, and you can get a much better idea of your colors. So I started working on this earlier, and my colors may have started to dry a little bit. Yeah, because acrylic dries very quickly. Okay, so that's one of the deals with it. So I'm just breaking this down and painting each one of these different sort of shapes a slightly different color. And I'm going to focus mainly on oranges, but I'm going to bring just a dot of blue. Well, that's already too much. To be able to add to some of them to neutralize it, and bring in some white as well. Now, one disadvantage of using a palette paper like this is, and especially if you're working with tubes like this, it's pretty much impossible to get any of the excess paint back into the tube. So you do end up having to throw it out. They do have types of palettes where you can close it in and you put this moist cloth inside, and it keeps your paint nice and moist, so when you come back to it again, you can still access, because you can see this, even this color is pretty much all dried up already. So once again, when you start, you can see why it's important to start with the light color. I'm just finishing this up, so I just grabbed that red, and then I added the yellow, and you can see how it's always best to start with the light, because doing that meant I don't have enough of the yellow. Get enough here. So I'm going to pull in just a hint of white to tone that down. Now you can use palette knives for mixing your colors, but for something this small, it's not necessary. So I'm working with a flat brush. There's different types. I have a few rounds. This is called a filbert, and I have a few rounds. So we have rounds and flats, filberts, different types, and it's just the thing you want to pay attention to is the different type of brush stroke that it makes. And for this project, I'm mostly focusing on this one because I want to get really sharp shapes, nice hard edges to it. So you'll notice I flipped my board upside down here, my painting, and that's because you can get the best edge from this point of the brush, not at the back of it. And so, being that I'm right-handed, I want to be able to be accessing it from that side. You'll notice right away, well, maybe you can't, but if I show it closer, that acrylic is not very opaque. It's quite translucent, in fact, meaning you can see the color coming through. It's not totally covering it up. That can be frustrating when you're starting, especially when you are first starting painting. You often have the thought of, the first time I paint it, I have to get it to look exactly what I want. But that's not typically the thing you want to work towards. So you can see as I'm trying to get this side, I can't create a nice sharp line. So that's why for this project that I'm doing, I keep flipping it around. Now, if you're doing something where you're it's including blending and you're working really spontaneous and loose, that's a different story. You're not going to be having to do that sort of thing. So how to get rid of those lines underneath is it is going to take some layering. It's going to take a few other colors. You're also going to notice certain colors are much more transparent than others. One of the more transparent colors is yellow. So I remember always thinking there's something wrong with my yellow because it never seems to cover up the color. But that's just the nature of pretty much every yellow that I know of. So the reason, one of the benefits of having it transparent like this is it works great for layering. When you're layering your paints. I'm just gonna stand up here and so I can get a better view of what I'm doing. So when you're layering, by having it somewhat transparent, it still brings up the color underneath. Boy, this is so confusing. I'm trying to realize and remember which colors, where my lines are changing. So I'm gonna have to let that dry and then go back to that again. I don't normally paint on a white board because, let me show you, if I can hold this close to the camera, it's hard to see. Maybe if I can move the camera instead. What I'm trying to show is all the white showing through from underneath. That's pretty typical that that happens. And I usually work on a colored surface so that you can let it show through and then it doesn't bother you. At least it doesn't need to bother you. Some people still get bothered, but I love to be able to just be loose enough to let that show through. But I was experimenting with something different with this piece, but because now it's bothering me. And for this particular project that I'm doing, so I'm gonna have to go back in there. Oh yeah, and of course with acrylic paint, you just clean your brushes with water, which I have down here. And if you thin your paint, if you want to create a wash with your paint, which I don't want to do for this particular project, then you would, you can just thin it with water. You can also use alcohol for thinning it down. So this, the idea is that this will have a bit of a stained glass sort of feel to it. I'm going to change it just a little bit, so I'm going to bring in just a touch. Look at that, how quick that changed. Just hardly any blue. So that's very important when mixing colors, is don't grab too much of that other color. Like that was just a pinprick of blue on there and how much it changed it. So if you can see, if I want to get a real sharp edge, I'll actually paint sideways with my brush. And I need more, so once again, just I'll bring it in so you can see how little bit I'm getting. I don't know if you can see that tiny little dark dot on there. Hard to see because of the lighting. And then I can always grab more, never hurts. And now even a second dot was perhaps too much already. That's all right. I don't particularly like this brush for this, what I'm doing, but right now, all my own brushes are at home, so I'm left with using these other ones that I had to borrow. And so you really have to learn which brushes you like. And that takes time. There's not a right or wrong type of brush. It's really what you prefer. And sometimes the brush even has to get worn in a little bit. But this one, these bristles are too long and too soft for my liking. They're not holding still. So for this sort of accurate type painting, it's not giving me, it's making it much slower for me to be able to work. All right, let's clean that one. Let me try and see if I can, I'm gonna try and pick a different brush. In fact, there's a shorter one, also a bit soft. This is called the Ferro. It's loose on there, so that's a bit of a problem. But we'll see how this goes. All right, so I start with my yellow. I'm gonna pull a bunch of yellow aside. I need to get more paint on here. I'm trying to be conservative because I'm only gonna be working at this for a few minutes. So I don't want to get a whole extra wasted amount of paint. I almost should have gone over all these sections with white first to have blocked out all of the lines underneath. Because white is, especially titanium white. There's another one called zinc white, which is very transparent. Titanium white. If you're going to buy white paint, I strongly suggest you get the titanium, unless you want a real transparent. Zinc is another white you can get, and it's very transparent. So the titanium is the most common one that you'll see because it is very very opaque. So it does a nice job covering up your work underneath of it. All right, let's add a little bit of white to that color that I had there. So I'm not sure if this brush might work better. Except it's a little wide. For this shape here. So really pay attention to the area that you're painting and the size of brush that you're using. You should alter your brush to go with the area, right? So I'm working with a lot more paint now this time. A lot more paint on my brush, and that's going better. If you don't like tedious work, then I would suggest you don't try this type of a painting. As you can see, this is rather tedious type of painting. Something much looser is maybe a little more exciting in the moment to work at. But for me, it's just right now, it's a good exercise and it's good practice to work at getting just that handling of a brush, how to get the brush to do what you want it to do. Okay, so I'm just gonna put on some music and keep working at this for a while.
Hey, Rick, I'm excited to see your art piece done. Will you still be working it? You might be done by Friday, huh? I have to leave early because
Okay.
I'm meeting people. But you'll post it, right, if you finish it?
This one, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll post it. I might get done.
I'm super excited to see it. It's so different than anything I've ever seen. So
Well, it's definitely different than what I usually do, that's for sure. So,
yeah, it's neat. Okay. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good week. Bye.
okay, see you all, or see you, Teresa. I mean, how are we doing? About 20 after 5. Anyone else? Anyone have any questions? I don't want to leave you. I should sort of check in. Brenda, are you still there? Yeah. Let me just pause this a minute. Okay, so now I'm going to show something very different. For anyone who's just tuning in, who's just tuned in to watch painting. The other one is very tight, very careful. It's almost like just the other sort of thing is almost just like as if you're painting a room. You mix your colors, you put them in, and that's not as typical, but it is still a possibility. Whereas this, what I'm doing now, is maybe a little more typical to how one might approach painting. Trying to get so we can see the So again, I'm going back to this because more of a, what I see as a bit of a design flaw in the piece. And I need to just break, which is a little hard because I'm not in the moment anymore of the piece. So hopefully I won't ruin it. It's now, I don't normally do this. This is one of my worship sort of pieces where I just, I start from scratch, from nothing, and just start putting down colors. So I just trying to, as I say, here, what I believe the Holy Spirit is telling me and showing me to put down. So it's like I'm praying the whole time while I'm painting. Not typical type of prayer. But I do believe, since God's the best artist, the best designer, that he's going to have the best ideas of design as well. In fact, design truly is actually based on his design. It's not truly a human sort of thing. It's much more divine. Makes sense since he's the master artist. So even what I'm doing now, which may be hard to understand or even believe that it's possible, but this that I do, knowing even just very quickly and almost just by intuition where to put the color, comes from the exercise earlier where we copied the black and white photograph. It's the same principle, really. Of observing, because as I put down these bits of yellow and as I also have put in red, which ends up being a darker color, it creates the same sort of effect. The red and the yellow, the value creates the same effect as this black and white on my raven. Okay, so this is foundational for doing this sort of thing. Even so, just again to explain that what we're doing is not really so much about sketching. It is, but it's more than that, I guess is what I should say. It's more than just sketching. Like that's what tells me that I'm putting it, in this place and not right here. You'll notice it. I'm putting it down. It may seem like if you're watching that it's just completely random, but it's not. In my mind, there are areas that I'm avoiding as well, where I'm very specifically not putting down the yellow. So it has to do with that, and it also has to do with design, because I know that the yellow is going to stand out, so I'm trying to create this up and down sort of effect. I don't want it to feel straight across like it did before. So that's why I'm going to pull it up higher here. And now the other way I can change the shape is actually painting some background on top of my shape. So I started with this purple. So yeah, so if you look at it now, it's not feeling so dominant straight across. And I can even increase that by pulling this purple on top, which will even lower some of the areas and maybe even take out some of this or make it not quite so dominant up there. Now, when I do this, just something to keep in mind here, this is creating a slightly different look by putting this purple on top. So I can't do it only in one spot. I have, because it feels different, I don't want it to draw attention to itself. So something I'm gonna have to get it to not draw attention to itself, I actually do more of it, not less. So if you've done something in a painting and it's standing out, sometimes we just feel we need to get rid of it right away, or we need to just do only one time and no one's going to notice if it's only done once. No, actually, you do something more often. Something is done only once, like you know, a color. You know, you think, well, I don't want to make this color too dominant, so I'm just going to stick it in there once. That's it. That accomplishes the same thing. You can make it dominant by doing it a whole lot, or you can make it stand out by doing something only once. Just like, you know, if everyone's in a room, or if everyone is, you know, dressed in black in a room, and then you go in and you're dressed in white, you will stand out. But if there's like 20, 30, 40 people dressed in white, and no one's going to notice you anymore, even if the dominant is still black. I don't know if that made any sense to you guys or not, if you're listening. But anyway. All right, I'm going to leave it at that now. Just leave my painting. But you can see this was a very, very, very different approach than the rhinoceros. My brush in there to make sure I don't get paint on anything. So set that aside and let's see where you guys are at. So let me pause this.